Now, welcome to pricing strategies, right? The first strategy we're going to cover is cost plus pricing, okay? What is that strategy? Well, it's essentially what it says it is. It's cost plus whatever you want to make in your product or services. So again, when you look at the cost has two aspects, two variables. One is the fixed cost. Those are charges and costs that won't change on a month-to-month basis. And then you have variable costs. These costs are more fluctuating over time. So it's hard to sometimes narrow down the costs. So what you wind up doing is creating some type of average over time of what the average cost is going to be. So when you take your fixed cost plus your variable cost, that's going to change over time, and try to get that average, you're going to get your total cost. And then you add on top of that your margin or what you want to make on that product. So for example, you're developing a software or a product, and that widget costs you, let's say, 50 bucks to make. Now you determine how much more you want to make on top of that. So you're going to multiply that. So let's say, for example, you want to make 20% on that. That is your markup. You mark it up by 1.2, you multiply that, and then you get that 20% increase. So that is what your markup or your margin. So what happens here? You got your cost, you got your markup, now you have your price. You have your cost, markup, and now you have your price to market. The only two problems with that strategy is, number one is, sometimes if you start selling a lot, you're in the assumption that it is your cost will go down. The more you can turn over your inventory, the more the cost will go down. But the truth is, sometimes when it's not being utilized, when your facility is not being utilized correctly, or you're not selling as much, then guess what? The quantity or the volume is low, so that your costs are actually higher. So in other words, low volume, high cost. But sometimes you might have high volume. It does not mean it's going to be lower cost. What does that mean? Sometimes when you have a higher volume in a certain business, your cost will actually rise accordingly. So again, it's a very tricky thing to assume that cost will remain fixed. So over time, we need to be able to monitor what that cost is. And if that cost begins to rise, so maybe that your margin might go up as well. And that's where one of the problems happens. The second problem is this, is indifference. The product, right? The customer doesn't care what your costs are. They just know what they want to pay. How much? How much am I going to pay for this product? So using a cost plus strategy has to be able to look into, are you going to price yourself out of the market if you price it too high? So let's say, for example, the cost is higher than normal or of the competitors, and if you add your markup, then you're going to price yourself out of the market. So the key here is really to watch what your cost is going to be and try to reduce that as much as possible so that you become competitive in the market. And we're going to talk about market-based pricing in just a bit. But also, when you look at your markup, right? What's your reasonable markup? That's that's something that you had to actually determine, right? So what we just discussed here is what we call the cost plus pricing, taking the cost of your product and you add what you want to be able to make on the actual the product. And so that's how you're going to be able to determine what you want to be able to do. So that is just one of the different pricing strategies that you guys have to actually put together to be able to make a decision. So let's go ahead and move on to the next video.